Ever since I was young, I dreamed of owning land of my own, a place where I could breathe deeply and live without noise or interference. Last year, that dream finally came true. I purchased a sprawling old farm, a breathtaking stretch of countryside with rolling hills, a faded red barn weathered by time, and a sturdy farmhouse that had stood proudly for more than a century. It felt perfect. Standing on my porch, gazing across the fields that now belonged to me, I felt a kind of pride and calm I had never experienced before. This was my sanctuary, my personal kingdom, clearly marked with a private property sign at the entrance. I believe I had found my forever home, a place where I could build something lasting. I couldn't have been more mistaken. The trouble began about a month after I moved in. One bright afternoon, a polished sedan rolled up to my gate. A woman stepped out, clipboard in hand, wearing an expression of absolute determination. She introduced herself as Karen, the president of the local Homeowners Association. I was puzzled. I knew there was an HOA tied to a new subdivision a few miles down the road, but my farm had been there long before any of those houses were built. I politely explained that my property wasn't part of her association. She responded with a thin, tight smile and handed me a stack of official-looking papers. Across the top, stamped in bold red letters, were the words demand for payment. According to her, I owed thousands of dollars in back dues and was violating numerous HOA regulations I had never even heard of. I tried calmly showing her a property map outlining my boundaries, but she refused to acknowledge it. "Pay immediately," she said, "or we'll begin eviction proceedings. This entire area falls under our jurisdiction." Eviction from my own farm. That was the moment I realized this wasn't confusion. It was an attack. The letters kept arriving. Each one grew more aggressive. They were packed with intimidating legal language. Threats of liens, fines for overgrown grass, complaints about the color of my barn. It was beyond absurd. I knew they were wrong, but knowing and proving were two different things. I spent long hours at the dusty county records office, digging through ancient deeds and fragile maps. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the air as I traced property lines stretching back decades, even centuries. I searched for that one definitive piece of evidence that would prove my farm had never been part of their planned development. Meanwhile, the HOA escalated. It wasn't just letters anymore. One evening, I looked outside and saw Karen and the entire HOA board gathered along my property line. Karen stood there dramatically pointing at my barn, while her associates nodded in agreement. They spoke loudly, gesturing at my home as if it were some kind of public blight they had the authority to correct. It felt like a siege. I was being harassed on my own land. That was enough. The next day, I went to a hardware store and bought a dozen no trespassing signs. I planted them firmly along my boundaries as a clear warning. I also installed a comprehensive security camera system covering every angle of my property. If they intended to cross a line, I wanted proof. I wasn't just protecting my farm anymore. I was preparing for a legal confrontation. I hired a lawyer who specialized in property disputes. After reviewing my findings and the HOA's claims, he shook his head and said it was one of the boldest overreaches he'd ever encountered. The conflict quickly intensified. Karen and the HOA officially filed a lawsuit, attempting to place a lien on my farm and force me into their association. They were trying to take control of my home. We ended up in formal mediation. The room was cold and sterile, the tension almost tangible. Karen and the HOA's attorney sat confidently on one side. On the other, it was just me and my lawyer. They presented their case first, displaying a modern development map with a conveniently drawn boundary that included my land. They spoke about property values and community standards, painting me as an uncooperative outsider damaging the neighborhood's image. Karen even accused me of lowering their aesthetic standards. My anger simmered, but my lawyer simply nodded for patience. When it was our turn, my attorney stood, but he let me speak. I stepped forward and carefully unrolled a large certified map from the county surveyor, dated 1923. The hand-drawn document was beautiful in its detail. I pointed to the clearly defined boundaries of my farm, established nearly a century before their subdivision existed. Then I presented the original deed, signed, sealed, and free of any HOA covenants. I followed with zoning records classifying my land as agricultural, entirely separate from their residential community. One by one, I dismantled their argument. The mediator compared my historical documentation with their modern redraw. He asked their attorney if they had anything older than my records. They did not. Karen's confident expression dissolved. She looked at her lawyer, who quietly shook his head. Their entire campaign had been built on nothing. The mediator ruled their claim baseless. I had won. Walking out of that building felt incredible. When I returned to the farm, the air seemed lighter, the sunlight warmer. I stood once again on my porch, just as I had the first day, but this time the peace was earned. I had defended my home against someone who believed intimidation was enough to seize control. A few days later, I noticed a moving truck outside Karen's house in the subdivision. Word spread quickly that the failed lawsuit had cost her the presidency. I didn't feel sympathy. Actions have consequences. Life on the farm is exactly what I envisioned. Quiet, peaceful, and truly mine. Every sunset I watch from that porch reminds me of the battle I fought and won. It reminds me never to let anyone bully you or claim what isn't theirs. Sometimes you have to stand firm, not just for your property, but for your peace of mind. And I can promise you, victory makes those sunsets even sweeter. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever dealt with an overreaching HOA, share your experience in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.